Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Optimizely and Luminary Meetup. We're pretty excited to welcome you all here. My name is Marty Drill. I'm the CEO and founder of Luminary, and we're partnering with Optimizely today for this meetup. We are quite thrilled to welcome you, Ynze. Ynze the Optimizely MVP, Platinum MVP. And so there's an old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, and that's why we share knowledge. So over to you, Ynze.
Hi, everyone. Marty gave me already a really good introduction, but at Luminary, I'm a senior developer and the Optimizely platform lead, which means I basically help and support anything related to Optimizely, also including solution architecture and development. So I'm still a senior developer and I still work on all the Optimizely projects and am across them. So I'm here to talk about multi-site. And this is going to be very much in context of a recent project we did for Daimler, which was a multi-site project, which really challenged us to innovate and sort of reinvent how we manage multi-site. And I'm going to talk about three things, which is our approach, then how did we achieve our goals, and some of the results and key learnings that we took away from that. So Daimler is one of the world's largest manufacturers of commercial trucks and passenger vehicles. This is in worldwide, and they have many different brands as part of the Daimler group, and therefore needed multiple sites. So these are some of the brands: Fuso, Mercedes-Benz, Freightliner. This is what we'll be focusing on, but there are different other smaller brands which are really going to capitalize over the work that we did for some of these bigger brands. So our approach was to think from a brand perspective. So often what we see is you think about the site, and you're like, we need to build this site and that site, but we really approached it from a brand perspective. So what are we building for the brand? It can be multiple sites and applications, and they all need to sort of rely on each other to work together. So in order to achieve an efficient multi-site setup, we really wanted to heavily reuse components and do this effectively as well. So this doesn't mean create a component for one of the brands and then copy it, paste it, and try to change it, and then sort of save time that way. We really wanted to create the components, smart components, that have the styling applied as a layer sort of on top of those components. And so you have the different styling for the brands, even though it's using the same set of components. We also want to ensure that the editing experience reflects the brands. So this is important to keep that brand identity and not get the editors confused while they're editing in a multi-site setup. And yeah, we really wanted to make sure that they feel like that they get a customized experience in a way. You know, it's really tailored to their brand. So the last thing here is that brands should benefit from each other's developments and not get in the way of each other. So what that means is we wanted features that were developed should help other brands and be shared with other brands, but we did not want to limit brands and say, you know, okay, you can't do this because there's something happening with the other brand, or you know, you're limited in your flexibility. So we still wanted to maintain that full flexibility. Then, so how do we achieve this? So first off is we designed it for reusability. So it's important to, everyone thinks very technical immediately, how could this work? But it really starts with design. And we set up a multi-brand design system. So we use Figma in this case. But what you can do, for example, in Figma is that you have sort of a shared set of components, and you can design variants, and they can still relate to sort of the shared component. And if you make changes to one of the variants, it will actually tell you and reflect back to saying this is a shared component, so it has to reflect across the different brands. Then one important key fact as well was that the components had to support these multiple variations and also make it very configurable and have different display options, because we still wanted to have brand distinction. So in order to achieve that, we needed all these sort of different options, and the brands needed to use separate options in order to reuse a component but still have different features in a way. And as you can see here as well on the screen is on the left side is the Fuso website, on the right side is the Freightliner website. They still have their brand distinctions, but they're actually using the same components, but the styling is applied on top. Next off, here's another good example. So you might think, oh, these are all different components and whatnot. They're actually part of the same component, right? The same shared component library. And they just have all these different variants. And the brands apply these different colors, different variants to them, even though they're part of this sort of do it once strategy. Then the styling. So this was very important to get this right. Because we didn't want to build multiple components, we want to reuse the same one. And how we did this was to have the styling applied as a layer on top of the templates. So the styling is a separate layer or skin that lays on top of the sites and the HTML templates. And that contains, different icons, styling, CSS, typography as well. So that all sort of changes with the brand. And in some cases, there are JavaScript specific features which are specific to one brand, and that can also be sort of applied just for one brand. Then next, we get sort of in the Optimizely space, which is the page structuring. So by standard in Optimizely, you're somewhat limited in what you can do in terms of the information architecture. It's mostly based on the page type, and then you can select which page types you can use under that. But that's very static and done by the developer. And we needed something a little bit more flexible. So we created page restrictions. We extended Optimizely to have page restrictions that are more flexible and based on the brand. So for example, you're using a homepage template, but one of the sites has a product page. You can only create this on the one brand. This doesn't, this cannot be used on the other brands. So we needed that to be flexible. And one thing we did as well is let the global administrator be able to selectively choose which pages you can actually create under a page, so that it's more flexible that way. And yeah, if you know how it works in Optimizely, then this will make maybe more sense to you as well. One of the things you run into when you're trying to reuse a template and apply a skin on top is that it's not that flexible, and it all has to be the same. But we created it so that you can actually change this in terms of a setting to change this per page or even per brand, so that you're not sort of stuck with not being able to reuse certain templates. We created some other dynamic content features as well, such as branded thumbnails and have flexible content area restrictions, which blocks you're able to add onto a page, and conditional content properties as well. So if you wanted to have a certain property that was brand specific, you can do that. So here on this image, for example, you can see we have like a form section, and this is the same component, but it's showing different thumbnails based on the brand. So which site you're editing, that brand, you can actually visually see, okay, this is what it looks like for this brand. And you can see that with some of the other ones as well. It's also at the top. I think people in person can't really see it, but those are Fuso specific components. So they can't actually be used for the other brands. And this is something we had to develop. Here's some more dynamic content features. So what we did, for example, is the text editing. I talked about this earlier, is that we wanted to have the content editing experience reflect the brands, and you're editing in a certain brand context. So here you can see we've got basically the same sort of text areas, but they look differently, different typography, different styling, depending on which brand side you're editing. And what's interesting here as well is that one of the brands had a requirement to be able to add a button within the text field, but all the other brands benefited from this feature because even though only one brand specifically was built for them, this was easily shared because these components are shared, and the text features are also shared. So user management, I just wanted to mention this because kind of tailors to, having these different brand experiences. So we wanted editors to be restricted to a single brand, which basically means if you have a manager working at Fuso, they need to edit the website. They should not see any other brand websites. They should only see their websites, be able to edit those with their own brand experience. And it shouldn't overlap with the other brands. We didn't want that. The client wanted clear distinction between that. And that's why the workflows are also managed per site. So you can do all of this in Optimizely, but I just wanted to mention it because it's important to really work with this as much as you can. The roles and permissions are key. So yes, this is all like in Optimizely, and you have a lot of flexibility here. So work out what you want. What do you want to do? Do you want to hide the site for a specific editor, like in our case? Then you should think about that and implement that using Optimizely's features, built-in features. And think, for example, about form submission data. We did not want one brand to see the form information from another brand, so that had to be clearly separated. And we did this by using a single sign-on integration. So this really helped with a lot of things as well, and having this sort of massive multi-brand login where people can log in, they use their system they're familiar with. And the people at Daimler are very familiar with how they can configure things and set up the roles. Currently, Fuso has 2 sites. Then we have Freightliner, which has 1 site. And we're working on a corporate site now as well, and one for Mercedes-Benz as well. So, and then we're planning another one. So we're coming up to 5. And so yeah, currently there are 3 live. Yeah. That said, you can apply this to any number of sites. Yeah. And I think one key part is that we built 2 of the sites simultaneously as well, which is really helped us to work out sort of, how does this really work together? Because it's hard when you build one site and you're like, oh, but we're going to reuse it for another. But we built 2 sites together. So we already knew immediately while we were working on it, where it was going to be difficult and what we had to do to really achieve, effective multi-site. So here are some of the results. So yeah, more than 80% of the components are actually reused. So you might think, yes, but this component is slightly different, or how is that going to work? You actually can do it if you apply the things that we've talked about, making those variations, having the different options, using the content, the CMS sort of customizations, right? Customizing how the page structures can be set up, and how you can have the flexibility to hide certain things, like certain fields. We didn't have to copy and paste and start over on an entire component just because there's one, I don't know, product related label or something like that. We could just incorporate that with our flexibility that we implemented. So this significantly reduces the cost of your additional sites that you're creating. And it's great for maintenance. We fix any bugs. It works across all the sites. In one component, the sites that are using that component, we make changes. It applies to all the brands, all the sites. And despite that resulting in like a low cost, the quality is not compromised. It's actually the opposite, is that the quality gets better because you share all those features, image optimization, SEO, anything you do there will greatly benefit all of the brands. Here are some examples of the Lighthouse scores, and this is consistent across all the sites and the brands. And any improvements we do on this front in terms of performance, certain form features that need some performance gains, we apply that, and it will work for all the brands because they reuse the same components. Then some more key learnings. Work out the development strategy with your entire team. So that's why I started with design. It's not actually just, oh, how do I implement this in Optimizely in a way that's going to work out? The design is important to, and the front end QA, they all have to work together in a certain way to actually think multi-site. You're not going to QA two sites separately, right? When they're using the exact same components. So if you QA a component, you know they're the same in terms of functionality, and you can really optimize the QA in order to not double up on everything. Yeah, multi-site, it starts with great design, as I mentioned. If the design system is well set up, then you won't have issues like the design making changes in one brand and not in another, even though you're sharing that component. That could cause issues, right? But yeah, it starts with design. And simplicity is the way to go. It can sound very overcomplicated. You're thinking, oh, this multi-site, it's very complicated. But as you go along, make sure you're sticking to the simplicity and making the editor experience very straightforward. So I might have a hard time explaining it in a way that is straightforward, but the editor doesn't even know, right? The editor doesn't even realize that there's anything going on outside their brand, or that flexibility is not built in by default, which is really what we strive for. So stick to your principles and pivot the solution. It can really happen in this case where you're like, we want to reuse this, and a solution doesn't really work out. People stick to their old ways, start copying things over. Don't do that. Stick to your principle, but pivot your solution. If the solution is not working, think of a new solution, but don't start dwindling with the principles that you set up of trying to reuse as much as you can. And take advantage of Optimizely's features and extensibility. There's so much in Optimizely you can do. And what happens is people build a custom thing, and it takes a lot of time, and it really takes away from that efficient and effective multi-site development. So yeah, stick to Optimizely's features and flexibility, and build and think about it in a certain way, and build that out, sculpt it in a way that works for you and works for the team. Then if you want more info, I have a lot of details on my blog. I wrote a series about multi-site development in Optimizely. It's very tech heavy. So if you're very much into this, go and take a look. It shows you how to do conditional properties, how to do that, those dynamic thumbnails, how to have those flexible page type restrictions. It's all in there. So go check it out. And the Luminary website always has great information on the blogs, lots of different things on there, and more information about our clients as well, and Daimler.
The challenge for many companies when they've got multiple brands is that you end up with multiple platforms and everything being custom and bespoke. And it's an actual nightmare to manage it all. But you've come up with something that actually makes head office be able to get some level of control. Head office been the marketing and IT teams of, Daimler, but each individual brand and their marketing IT teams to have some flexibility that suits their brand and their current campaign or current situation or content strategy. And I think it's pretty wonderful. Well done. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Ynze. Cheers. Thank you, everybody.